who are you, Ed, and what do you do?
I'm Edmund McMillen, and I'm a game designer. I make games, independent games, I guess.
Great. And you're best known for Super Meat Boy?
Uh, or the Binding of Isaac at this point.
Fantastic, yeah. Great. Now, let's go back to the beginning. So, what were the games that really stood out to you growing up?
The game that actually, well, the games that stood out to me the most when I was young, I think around the age of 8 and 9, were the original Mario Brothers, Mario 2, and The Legend of Zelda. Those were like my holy kind of trinity of video games that
Sure.
were I was pretty obsessed with. I was also really into the original Castlevania.
Yeah.
That one's I hold close to my heart. It was kind of what in Contra, the games that my friends had, because I didn't necessarily have them all. I was like the last kid on my block to get an NES, and I usually had to just play whatever
Really? Oh.
whatever they were playing. And but I got lucky enough, and everybody seemed to have good taste, so I only played the great games.
Oh, that's great. Did you manage to finish Castlevania at all?
No, I could get as far as let me see. I could beat Frankenstein.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who I would always die on. Whoever was after Frankenstein. I don't think I could even get to the next boss.
Was it the Grim Reaper?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I got to the Grim Reaper once.
Right. Yeah.
Level was pretty hard for me, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Same. Definitely. Oh. Yeah. I mean, I've had an NES myself. I bought one last year, and me and a mate just spent all night just going through that level, and it was a nightmare. It was crazy, but yeah, it's so much fun. What can I say?
There's a lot that I liked about all those games that I try to recreate in what I'm doing now, and I think a lot of it has to do with the stuff that's kind of left up to your own imagination. Like the reason why Castlevania was so cool to me is because I got to think a lot about this world where all like these classic movie monsters kind of dwelled and were alive, and they were all in the same kind of universe. I mean, really, Castlevania was kind of the Smash Brothers of monster movies.
Right.
And it was really cool for me as a kid to be able to play that, and then I would draw up like levels and creatures and stuff that I like wanted to see in the game that I liked, and like I had an obsession with Audrey 2 from Little Shop of Horrors when I was little, and I always wanted to see like a big plant boss. And there's actually a game called Monster Party, which was kind of the same, along the same lines. It was really, really, really weird.
Yeah.
That just paid homage to lots of movie monsters. That stuff.
Oh, that's great. I mean, obviously, in England, Indie Game the Movie premiered on a popular channel only in last November. So you've only kind of become like really well known, especially in England, since that premiere last year.
Yeah, which is interesting. You never like, I don't know. It's probably not that much different over there, but like over here, and as far as my peers and people I associate with, nobody really watches TV. Everybody's just on the internet.
Yeah.
Netflix and whatever else, and I don't know many people who watch television, so I wasn't sure like, okay, it's on TV over there, but what does that really mean at this point? Like, do people still really watch television that often? And it was interesting to get all this kind of response. Like, I got a shitload of followers on Twitter, and a lot of people. It was just basically like the movie kind of re-premiered.
Yeah.
To a large group of people, and that was pretty cool. It's hard to completely understand though, because it's not the same over here. Like over here, when the movie premiered on Netflix, because it was actually in theaters here.
Yeah.
And it was played at Sundance and everything.
Oh, wow.
And when it got on Netflix, though, is when people started, really seeing it, and then people would stop me on the street and stuff, and be like, "Oh, I saw the movie." That was pretty bizarre. But I don't live in the UK, so
yeah, sure.
I don't know how many people are actually watching and what they thought, but it seems pretty cool. Like it seems like never thought I would be on television, or never really thought I would be in a movie. But.
Oh, indeed. I mean, I only saw the movie. It must have been just when it premiered on Netflix over here, and that's how I kind of got to know like you and Tommy, how it was like in Super Meat Boy, the hellish development. I mean. I mean, I've seen like some interviews where you said you kind of portrayed as a character, like the nice guy Ed, really, but but you're not really sure as to what was going on really at that time.
Yeah, it's kind of a mind fuck in a way. The movie was very weird. It's hard to explain because it's so bizarre, but it's weird to be like caricaturized in a movie in a way because there's no way for them not to do it. They're taking these little bits and pieces of this small amount of time in my life, and they're trying to show the character that I am and the significance of my character in this movie, and they're editing in a way that has to make sense, and the editing in a way, everybody comes off a little one-dimensional. Because that's how movies work. You can only cram so much into an hour and a half. And it was weird kind of coming off as this nice guy. Not that I'm a mean guy, but like I am just as crazy as Phil. I'm just as emotional as Tommy. Like I had all those same emotions. Like if things were edited differently, I would have been the Phil Fish of that movie. And I worried about it too, because I worried about saying crazy things in interviews, and I trust me, I did say my fair share of really bizarre. I didn't threaten suicide or murder, but I got close. I'm sure I said some really, really bizarre things that are quite cringeworthy. But luckily, I lucked out in terms of as far as things that are quoted in the movie. I mean, I think the worst thing that I say that's taken out of context was, using hyperbole and saying that I felt like I was in a concentration camp.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
But for the most part, I assume people know that I'm not actually saying that.
No.
That I am. But that is the one thing in the movie people like. If they want to give me shit, they'll say that. But Tommy and Phil seem to have their fair share of one-liners that they can be knocked down with. But it's not what I expected. But I can't complain because I wasn't portrayed poorly. So
yeah, indeed, yeah, definitely.
It's just weird to be portrayed in. I don't know. It's odd.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Right. Let's kind of go back. I mean, you kind of started from Newgrounds and developing Flash games, and you took some classes, didn't you? And you kind of failed them, but you was aiming to learn enough so you could make some Flash games to see what you could accomplish, really.
Yeah, I mean, as a young kid, like the way my family worked, as far as my mom had one brother, I had one sister, and her brother had a few kids. So like my family is essentially my cousins and my sister. Oh. So in that environment, my cousins were all kind of overachievers, and they always did amazing in school. And I, on the other hand, was kind of the black sheep of the family, and I didn't do well in school. But I almost felt like there was no point because I'm never going to be like them. It's never going to come close, so there's no point in even trying. So I kind of always had this mindset of, I'm going to school to learn, and I don't really care about the grades that I get.
Yeah.
So like I floated through high school, doing the minimal amount of work, and then, the few classes I took in college, I took to learn what I could from what I needed, because I had a very specific thing in mind that I wanted to do. So I took the classes, failed the classes, but learned enough to go home and make a website and use Flash on a very basic level. And that did start my video game career. I didn't know I was making, primitive video games. I thought I was just making weird interactive Flash stuff with this tool that was made to make websites.
Yeah.
But it kind of opened me up to the Newgrounds scene, which was, Tom was one of the first people that really experimented with Flash back in the day when it really wasn't at all designed to make video games with. They were just starting to support some action script stuff that would allow people to make more video game-like things.
Sure.
But for the most part, Tom and a few other people were manipulating things in kind of just, kind of hacking things around in order to make a video game, primitive, interactive video games.
Yeah.
And I don't even think anybody really thought much of it because you couldn't make money back then.
Yeah. I mean, when I was in, over in America, it's called high school, but it's called a secondary school. But when I started in 2000, Flash games were just about to take off, and instead of go into the computer room and doing work, as you do, you go on the internet and you look around for any kind of games, and you go straight away to the Flash games. And there's always one I remember around the time Matrix Reloaded came out. There was a Stickman game, and you could do like the bullet time and the kicks and.
Yeah, I remember that actually. I remember. Well, yeah, because that was back in the day. Like none of my work was really ever that popular. That game was very popular.
Right.
Yeah, that was around there was tons and tons of stick animation fighting. There's like long drawn out fight scenes, and then somebody finally made a game with it.
Yeah, so many days wasted on that. So many days. But yeah, so after a few years, did you decide to? You said about Tommy also on Newgrounds. Did you kind of like bump into each other somehow, and that's how Team Meat started, or was you?
We each other, but that was 10 years or 8 or 9 years before we actually started working together.
All right.
Like I knew him as Tommyism, and he knew me as my website, which was called This Is a Cry for Help.
Right.
And we were both like affiliated with Newgrounds and on the Newgrounds network. He did a lot of like animations and some interactive Flash, games.
Yeah.
He had a game called Bitch Hunt and Nail Jesus to the Cross. I remember playing both of those games.
Okay.
But I didn't really know who he was until much, much, much later. Like fast forward, at least 8 years, and he randomly got in contact with me because one of his games that he'd been working on with a friend called Goo had made it into the finals in the AGF, and he saw that I had won one year, and was like, "Oh, I remember him." And then he just randomly hands me and was like, "Hey, what can I expect?" Basically. And we started talking from there, and I met him at GDC that year because I think one of my games was in the finals that year. I think it was Coil, and
okay.
And we met up and eventually started hey, let's make a little game together, a little Flash game, and we made a game called Gray Matter. And we worked together really well, and he actually maybe 6 to 8 months later, I was working on a larger project, which was going to be a sequel to Gish.
Yeah.
Which was the game I won in the IGF years in the past. But he was going to come on as a secondary programmer for a console version of Gish.
All right.
And he actually came down and lived in our office for a few months.
Right.
And but that went sour.
Oh.
Soon after, and I had to leave the office, and so did he. So he lived with me for a little while, and that was when we were like, "Hey, we'll make Meat Boy. We got to do something with this Microsoft deal that we basically have, and let's make Meat Boy a console game." And that was it.
So so the Microsoft deal was based on Gish 2 then.
Yeah, it was started as Gish 2 and then turned into more of a remake for Gish.
Right.
In the end, they just said they were interested in whatever I was working on. They just wanted to work on a project with me, and so it was an easy kind of switcheroo in that respect. Because they just wanted to work on anything. Gish didn't matter as much.
Right.
So we were able to get him on board with Meat Boy after some persuasion.
Okay. Oh, that's great. So I remember when Super Meat Boy was released in October of 2010. I remember because the thing is, I don't own a modern console. I mean, I'm always from the person who I like retro games. I grew up with like Mega Drive and SNES and things like that. And then I just think they're so much more fun than what's out now. I can't stand what's coming out now, really. And first time I moved out, and I was living with a housemate, and he had this 360. And he just fired up this 2D game of this little red guy just running about, and I thought, what's this? And it was weird. I just kind of walked over, sat down, and just watched him play. I haven't done that in years, and I thought, this is really fun. And he handed me it, and I was playing like the first 5 levels, and I just was hooked onto it. It was so good. It kind of reminded me of, like, say, Mario and a bit of Sonic as well, in a way, but just more, much more violence, but really good, and it just kind of nailed really everything of what harkened back to, really, which is great. But from when it released in October 2010, so you started around, was it 2009, early 2009?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, as like the movie um, says in a way, they say Microsoft says, "Can you release it in October,
Yeah.
or else?" So yeah, so and that was pretty much documented in a way anyway.
Yeah, they couldn't. There. Of course, there was tons of stuff that we couldn't show and couldn't say for legal reasons.
Yeah.
And things were actually much worse than they appeared as far as what they required and what we had to do and what we actually lost. That's all stuff we couldn't talk about legally, sadly.
Yeah.
But yeah, they kind of alluded to it. Like a lot of people were like, oh, they pushed you into this deal and then they didn't give you the promotion for X amount of hours on the first day when, that it's much, 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 much worse than that.
Yeah, yeah.
But you can only say so much in that situation. We allude to as much as we possibly can in interviews, but
yeah.
I
mean, yeah.
We crunched at least 4 months of work into less than 2, and
Wow.
really, I look back and at this point I'm pretty proud of how much work we actually got done in that amount of time. I think.
Yeah, definitely.
It was a pretty big achievement.
Yeah.
But definitely not something I ever want to do again.
No, no, I don't think so. I mean, it kind of alluded to it when it was release day, and you could see Tommy. He was pissed about how it wasn't being showcased, and even though it didn't show yourself, I imagine you was probably the same, if not more so.
I was asleep. We were on different schedules. He didn't. I don't think he did sleep. But I was sleeping through most of the time that it wasn't up. When I woke up, it was up.
Right.
And I wasn't checking anything. Also, I was like refusing to check. I just didn't want to look at it.
Right.
So I didn't even know most of that stuff was happening. I was just trying to kind of take a vacation from it on day one and not look at sales. I don't think I even looked at sales until the very end of the day.
Oh.
Someone told me what the sales were.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, looking back, I mean, it's been over 3 years now since release. I mean, do you still look back on it with like pride or just kind of regret or even scarred from it? I mean,
employee experience, like the development experience in general.
Yeah.
I don't regret it at all. I might have said that I did in the first couple months after the release. As time passed and gained perspective, and you learn from your mistakes, and I really loved working on Meat Boy. Like, it was just the last couple months, like Meat Boy development, and watching people play it, and the release was actually very enjoyable. Like I really liked it. I really loved working on Meat Boy, and I want to work on another one. We actually started working on a new one, and got sidetracked with eugenics, which was actually just kind of like a little project that we wanted to do really quick, turned into a really huge thing, and turned into our next game. But we still have like the skeletal, at the outline of the next Meat Boy.
Okay, I'll come back to that actually, because there's a few things that I do want to talk about that, if it's all right with you, Ed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when it obviously premiered in England, did you kind of realise that it was being broadcast? I mean, did you kind of see like a small spike in the sales of Super Meat Boy? I mean, do you kind of know when the game, indie game, or movie might be being shown somewhere? Because you just see this spike in sales from Meat Boy.
We don't. It doesn't really translate to sales as much. Like, I think Phil got a really big boost sales-wise when it came to the movie, because his game came out after the fact. So like there was a lot of people like that were looking forward to it because they saw the movie and they're like, oh, I gotta buy this game. It's finally coming out right after the movie comes out.
Sure.
And so yeah, it's definitely much different for him. For us, I think it definitely helped stimulate sales in the long run. It's very hard to tell because there are no spikes for like, oh, when it's broadcast here, then then it shows that a few more people bought it. But we can see like in the grand scheme of things, like sales have actually been getting better over time. So the only thing, I mean, I can assume that it's, the movie getting out there and getting around. Also, the movie helps people really think of the game as kind of a classic game.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when you think indie games, people will say like, what game should I buy? Or retro games in general, or difficult games, and a lot of people will just easily say, "Oh, Meat Boy," and then they'll go and buy it. So it's kind of become like a staple,
Right.
when it comes to indie games and difficult games.
Sure.
Period.
Okay. I mean, I was watching the interview that you and Tommy did separately on the State of Play YouTube channel about a year or so ago, and when Tommy was saying about how he's still recovering from it. I mean, when he said, I think he was saying about Microsoft were offering it to be put on the Windows 8 store, and he said that if he can just put the executable of the Steam file on and just give it to them, he'd be happy, because he just wouldn't want to open it. And obviously at that time as well, with the Mac version coming out, it didn't. I mean, there were some issues. I mean, I had a Mac, so I was waiting so long for the Mac version to come out, and I was so glad when it did. But obviously, it didn't have some things like, say, the like a full screen option or some bug fixes, and the like facing against Dr. Fetus, and there was a bug I was always coming into where I just couldn't finish the game. He would just stop running. He just completely stopped, and I had to restart. But yeah, and then in November, the Linux version comes out with bug fixes for the Mac version, full screen. So did like you and Tommy like kind of get up to a point where you go, yeah, I can come back to this and kind of improve it?
Yeah, so this is what happened, like with the Mac version.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
Essentially, Humble Bundle asked us to do the Humble Bundle, and we were like, okay, we got the Humble Bundle. So they needed a Linux version and they needed a Mac version, and like, in order to do the Mac version, they had somebody who was going to be doing those versions for us. Sure. And let's just say that person didn't really get things done.
Right.
And Tommy had to do it in like a couple of, like 48 hours or something.
Oh, wow.
And it was super, super horrible and super, super stressful.
Oh.
And it just became one of those things that we didn't want to look at again. But in the end, when I think they ended up fixing some stuff for us. Right. So that ended up helping us, but it wasn't. It was just a stupid, stressful thing. It's another learning experience where it's like, let's never do this again. Not have to fucking worry about it. But yeah, I can't. It's hard for me to speak for Tommy. It's definitely one of Tommy's things. But yeah, Tommy's just one man, and a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah, definitely. So, do you go onto Twitch a lot? Twitch.tv?
I go when I'm invited on casts and stuff. My wife actually used to do lots of different. Well, it was kind of secret. Like a lot of fans didn't know. It's like you have to follow her on Twitter, and then she would like do really late night streams, and her and I would be playing Isaac and doing talking to fans and stuff for the most part. But not a lot of people realize that. But we did that for a while last year. Other than that, I don't. I mean, I can only watch someone play Isaac so many times.
Yeah, sure. I mean, someone on Twitch did the world record for Meat Boy, and for any percent it was 18 minutes, and I just couldn't believe how it was almost like a robot just was programmed to do every.
Yeah, that was pretty nuts. I saw that actually.
Yeah, just mad. And then the 106% was in just under an hour and a half as well. It was just I mean, how do you feel when you see like a speed record like that in only an hour and a half after 3 odd years of work?
I mean, accomplished, I guess. Like you go in knowing that somebody's going to be way better than me at this game,
right.
And it's going to happen really fast. Like if I did this right, there's going to be tons of people out there who are going to be able to show me up like nothing.
Yeah.
And as time passes, to think that somebody is, like almost their life work is being the fastest at a game that I made it's like a huge honor.
Yeah.
It's a huge honor. There's somebody who spent months and months and months of repeatedly playing something that I worked on so they could be the best at it.
Yeah.
And that's just cool, and you hope and pray for something that significant. and yeah, it's definitely happened.
That's great. Um, so we're just going to go into the next project you did after Meat Boy, which is Binding of Isaac. Um, now, it's a funny story. I came across it as well. I mean, last year I was in my second year of university. Me and a friend that just bought these really cheap laptops because we just couldn't afford like a desktop for a good PC. And on Steam, we saw that Binding of Isaac was on sale, and I thought, let's see what it's like. Because obviously it was a half of Team Meat who made it, who designed it even, and it was just so addictive. I mean, it kind of harkens back to Legend of Zelda in a way as well, but with your own take on it. And it was just incredibly, incredibly addictive, really, especially the random feature as well, about how every room changes. I thought that was really great. How did that come about after Meat Boy?
It was just one of those random occurrences. It wasn't something that I. It's another one of those learning experiences where like we had finished everything with Meat Boy. And Tommy had been working on like the Mac version and a bunch of other stuff that he had promised that he wanted to do.
Sure.
And I was helping with that sort of stuff, like graphics and stuff for the Super Meat World and the editor, and a bunch of updates and level updates for the PC version and the Xbox Live version.
Sure.
And once that was all concluded, Tommy had recently got a girlfriend, and he was going to go to Hawaii on vacation, and my wife was of course giving me shit about going on vacation. I have a kind of a phobia of travel, so I don't travel.
All right.
And it's harder for me to relax. Like a vacation for me, that means travel means big stress.
Right.
And so it's the opposite of a vacation for me. Like I don't like traveling.
Okay.
So I wanted to be more realistic about what I needed, and I kind of felt like what I needed was to make a new game.
Yeah.
Something little, something small,
yeah,
and something just fun, like a little game jam in a week, like a little game in a week. I used to do this. Like before Meat Boy, there were quite a few games I made in a week or two. Like Ether was made in 14 days.
Right.
And I made a game called The C Word, which was made in a week. I made a game in less than 12 hours once called AVGM. So I wanted to do a game jam. I wanted to do something fun. And I just had an idea for a basic roguelike outline that was based on The Legend of Zelda, because I thought that was like the easiest level structure. The way the dungeons were kind of mapped out were similar to what people did with random generation and roguelikes, but nobody ever did it in that exact way. So I thought, it'd be pretty cool to do that. And I just kind of traveled down that avenue of like, I'm remaking Zelda and I'm making it my own. So how do I make it my own? And you know, what about Zelda made an impression on me when I was young? You know, where can I go with this?
Yeah.
And I kind of ventured down the path of, a lot of interviews. Miyamoto says that like Legend of Zelda was about him when he was young, going on adventures by himself out in the forest and stuff. And
I read that.
The what he wanted, that was his vision. What he wanted you to feel, the mystery of a kid's imagination wandering in the forest. And I thought, okay, well, I'll try to like pull that into my experience as a kid and the things that I could remember as a kid. There was a lot of religious dogma being thrown at me from all angles, but there was also some interesting sides of religion and how it was very creative and how it affected me creatively.
Yeah.
And very morbid and interesting in that way. And I decided that I would kind of write about that, since that was kind of my childhood creative weird experience. I would go on adventures too in the forest, but I would go on more adventures in my head. And I kind of wanted to make a game like that.
Yeah.
That was like my kind of Legend of Zelda. And I made it with Florian, who I'd made games with in the past. We made a game called Triachnid. We made the C Word. We made Coil, a bunch of games that were like nominated for different awards and stuff. So I worked well with him, and he was always kind of an up for anything kind of guy.
Okay.
And, whatever the weirdest shit, the weirdest, most controversial, weird shit that I could do, he was always down with, because he didn't care.
Yeah.
He was just a kid in a small village in Austria.
Oh.
So
wow.
And he was an old friend. He was a fan of mine from from when he was a young teenager. And he would always bug me on AIM and say he wanted to be a programmer, and he would show me his prototypes and stuff. And I eventually started making games with him. So we were just going to do this game in a week. It was going to be this little quick game in a week, and ended up working on it for 3 months. And I was just going to release it for free because I didn't know what else to do with it. I didn't see anybody actually caring and wanting to buy it. Yeah. I strongly believed that it wouldn't do well. But I started showing it to different people in the community, and I actually showed it to Steam.
Right.
And Steam said that they wanted it, and they thought it would be good to sell, even though it was in Flash. I'm like, are you sure? It's like, it's just a Flash game. Like, well, like, we could sell it for $10. And I'm like, well, I don't know. If people will buy it for $10, we'll sell it for $5. Like, I'll make the barrier of entry really low, and I just hope that maybe a few people that like Meat Boy would give it a chance because it was so cheap. Yeah. And that was it. I put it up, and it actually didn't do too well in the beginning. Like, it did. I mean, it exceeded my expectations, but it didn't do as well as it eventually would.
Oh, okay.
It started out really slow. It was this kind of bubbling.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for another 6 months until the summer of the next year that it exploded. Right. It just exploded. It was just this, like, bizarre, this kind of, like, it released, and then it's always like a steady, like, downhill slide, right, sales-wise?
Yeah.
And then it kind of tapers off, and then it just levels out, and it's just kind of floating week to week as it goes. And it was a great extra source of income, and I was very happy that people really liked it. And I was kind of trying to make a game that was going to be this underground hit, like some obscure midnight movie type game. That was the goal, like an obscure game that not many people would like. Right. And suddenly in the summer, word of mouth just kind of blew up. People started playing it a lot on Twitch. People started putting Let's Plays of Binding of Isaac, and it just shot up like crazy. It just like quadrupled. Like every week, it would just be doubling daily sales, and it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, almost like a smaller Minecraft type effect. Really? And then it just plateaued at this really high level that it's still been at for 2 years.
Wow. I mean, you say when it kind of took off in the summer, so that was around when the Wrath of Lamb expansion came out then?
Yeah, it was around the expansion. I guess it kicked it up enough.
Right. So that was was that just due to having like a moment of ideas, like thinking, oh, you wish you could have put this in there, or
the expansion?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of like so like when I originally released the game, it only the diehards that actually had the game from the beginning know that the game was much smaller then. So when I released the game, and I'd only been working on it for 3 months, it was a much smaller game. I can't even remember all the details, but there was a lot that was missing, like Satan and all that stuff that wasn't even in the original game. Like that, we ended up doing a Halloween expansion in October, and that Halloween expansion was free, and it updated the game with like a third more content. So it like made it much, much bigger, because I saw how much people liked it, and it really inspired me to like, all right, well then I could, put some more time and fix the ton of bugs that it was riddled with when it originally, released, try to optimize it a bit more and add some more content. And then after that, I noticed that people were still digging it, and I was really inspired by seeing people play it. So I thought, well, in all honesty, the reason why I did Wrath of the Lamb was because my wife wanted more content.
Really? Wow.
She was really obsessed with the game. She was the biggest playtester, and she had hundreds and hundreds of hours logged in. She had over 80 hours before the game released. So like, she was the number one playtester, and I really enjoyed seeing her enjoy playing it so much, because she never really got that into a game that I had made.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give her more content, more secrets. I keep her in the dark with what I make, and then when she'd play it, it would be a whole new thing for her to play. And Wrath of the Lamb was a way for me to do that. And I wanted to do a second expansion after Wrath of the Lamb, but I wasn't able to because of Flash limitations. At that point, like, Wrath of the Lamb actually took 6 months, so it took double the amount of time it took to make the original game to make this expansion, and most of that was due to the fact that Flash kept corrupting the FLAs because they were too huge.
Wow.
The Flash wasn't made to make a game that size, and hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
But what are you going to do? And I wanted to do another expansion after Wrath of the Lamb that was as big as Wrath of the Lamb, but I couldn't do it. But that's kind of what we're doing right now.
Yes, with Rebirth.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with Rebirth, so it is basically a rebirth. It's everything's remade from the ground up.
Yep.
Okay. So
Everything's remade from the ground up, and there's at least 33% more content on top of everything there was before. So you've got the original game, the Halloween expansion, Wrath of the Lamb expansion, and then 33% more of all that, like on top of everything. Everything's also greatly expanded and improved. All the original stuff is fixed up easily. There's a lot more stuff you could do with the original game, but then everything is greatly expanded. Like, I don't even know the total number. I think we were closing in at like, god damn, I'm gonna have to look it up. How many? That's funny. That's actually a search. 100 and what are the official? Give me the number. Let's see. 3. Okay. I think there are 200 in the game.
200.
Yeah, and Wrath of the Lamb adds over 150 more. So it's greatly expanded in that respect. There's a ton more enemies, a ton more bosses, a ton more rooms and secrets. There's like 3+ new characters to play as, and all the unlockables and story-driven aspects to go and kind of go along with it. And the game's going to look a hell of a lot better too. It looks more 16-bit. It's actually, I think it's higher than 16-bit, but it looks retro, like pixelated graphics. But it's getting a whole makeover, so it's a lot more moody looking, and it's a more living. So there's water dripping from the ceiling and the puddles that you can walk through and leave little footprints of water on the ground, and there's little bugs crawling all over the floor that you can just step on that are non-enemy kind of creatures, and little moths and all that sort of stuff too. So it's more alive. There's a bunch of new larger room types and that sort of stuff too, and traps and a bunch more interesting little bits and pieces there. And then the soundtrack has been completely redone too, and it's way more moody and ambient.
Right. So with the 16-bit style, was that? Did you want that to do that originally, or did you really want to kind of show this as?
I originally saw the game because I wanted to redo. It was Zelda. I wanted to look like Zelda. It was going to be an 8-bit game, like a NES style 8-bit game.
Okay.
But the truth is, I wanted it to be well animated, and I really can't animate in pixels, especially in Flash. You can't.
Sure.
So I just said, okay, fuck it. It'll take too long to do that. I'll just draw it. And I drew things really quick. I did all the art in that game in the first month.
Wow.
I just drew really messy, really fast, and it just got the job done. I'm not at all happy with the art in that game. It's cringeworthy at times. Even to the point where the artists that have been redoing all of my art, they'll redo it and they'll make it look pretty similar to what I had done, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't even. No, don't reference my art that much. Use your own interpretation here. They're more accomplished pixel artists than me, and I just please just go with what you know and make it look good. Don't just try to copy what my stuff looks like, because there's a lot of things in the game that are quite cringeworthy for me. And I'm like, oh my god, I don't want it to look like that anymore.
So you're definitely really happy with this version now, where it's coming along.
Oh yeah, so far quite happy. It'll be a greatly improved game in every respect, if all goes well, unless the game fails miserably at the end of development, or if they try to rush it, which I always worry about. But no, it should be improved in every way. There shouldn't be any complaints as far as. Well, I'm sure there'll be complaints because it's different.
Sure.
But I won't be complaining.
Yeah, that's the main thing.
Even to the point where they're doing item combinations in the base game that weren't featured in the original. Things just didn't stack exactly correctly. There was dominant items like Dr. Fetus and stuff like that. Once you got that item, every other tier effect that you got in the game didn't really matter at all.
Sure.
Now it does.
Yeah.
Even to the point where, like, if you had the Parasite and Dr. Fetus, your bombs split into 2 little bombs. So it's cool. And we're hoping to get, like, lasers to actually do the same thing, too. So you can get homing lasers and, you know, lasers that, like, come back at you and wrap around you and all that cool stuff. So that's kind of the end goal, like, is to greatly improve item synergies in the remake.
That sounds good. I mean, it's also, if I'm not mistaken, it's the first game where it's been released on a Sony system with PS4 and Vita as well.
Yeah, it'll be my first Sony game. Yeah, I never really thought about it.
Yeah, so how do you feel about it being on a Sony system?
Just fine.
Yeah, just fine.
I feel really bad. I feel really bad about how jaded I am when it comes to consoles because of my experience in the past with other consoles. So far, you know, this has not at all been reminiscent of the Microsoft experience. But the thing is the Microsoft experience at this point in the game was fine too. It wasn't until the very end that we got fucked.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm on guard. So far, so good. Like, I really like who I've been working with, and Tyrone's been great to work with, and he's been dealing with all the bullshit that I don't want to have to worry about.
That's good.
So far, so good. It'll be interesting. Like, I own a Vita, I own a PlayStation 4, but I don't actively play either right now.
Sure.
I don't play much of anything right now. I'm playing Magic a lot, but yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm interested to see how it performs on console. I'm interested to be able to play it on console, and they've got some really cool streaming services as well. So I think that'll be pretty cool to see. Since you know the Twitch community is so huge with Isaac, it'll be interesting to see how big it is on their Twitch type system. You know, on their system.
Yeah, sure. And also it's I've just lost what I'm going to say. Yeah, because I mean it's on the PlayStation 4 Vita, so it's not an option that's going to be an Xbox One then.
I mean, you never know. Like, it's not like an exclusive deal or anything, I don't believe.
Okay.
If Microsoft wants to work with me again.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not having to work with them directly, so I don't have to really worry about getting screwed over again. You know, it's Tyrone that's doing all the business aspect of this stuff, and it's his investment for the most part.
Okay.
So, if he wants to do it, I'm completely fine with doing it because it means I don't have to be involved with them, and it means more people playing the game and more money. So, what are you going to do? It's not like the game's not going to be good.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, I know with Super Meat Boy the game that's meant to be made for touchscreen devices, and I mean, would there be a chance that Isaac Rebirth would be on an iOS device or an Android even? Is that a possibility?
Tyrone wants to try it. I'm very skeptical on the controls on that type of device, especially with all the buttons you need with Isaac, because you need 2 analogs.
Yeah.
You need a bomb button, you need an item button, and you need a use pill / tarot card item. So that's a lot of buttons.
Yeah.
And that's questionable, but if he wants to put in the effort to do it, and it works well enough, and people really want it, and they want to play an inferior version, they can go nuts. Like, at this point, this is another company that's that is investing their time in it. All I care about is that the game plays well and is designed well.
Yeah.
That's if they want to do it, if people want to play it, then we'll try it out.
That's fair enough. I mean, it's been in the press with Nintendo about how they are with submission. I mean, obviously with Isaac, it's got religious undertones, but is there any chance that it could be on a 3DS, for example?
I would love it to be on 3DS. It was like our go-to handheld from the very beginning, and it went through. It's like twice gone through their approval system, and then it got approved until the very end, and then it's just like, oh no, can't because of our policy about religion in games. And that sucks. And until their policy changes, it's never going to make it through.
Sure.
But it's not to say we won't try again. You know, we will.
Yeah.
It's there's a lot of people at Nintendo that really want Isaac, and there's a few that don't.
That's fair enough. So when are you aiming to have that finished for? Is it this year?
Yeah, this year, before the end of the year, We don't have an exact release date yet. I'm trying to play it by ear. It's definitely going to be one of those it's done when it's done type situations. But
Right.
we'll see. Of course, the sooner the better.
Yeah.
For Tyrone, not exactly for me, but I definitely want to take my time or take our time with this one so we can make it, really polished.
Sure, that's fair enough. Okay, so with Isaac, now we're on to back to team meets with Mugenics. So this is a game which was, I just said, it was going to be made in a few months, but now it's turned into a couple of years. And I mean,
yeah, we're starting. Well, we just started year 2 2 months ago,
wow.
a month and a half ago.
Okay.
So we're a year and 2 months in. Yep, it's definitely a big project. It's bigger than Meat Boy, that's for sure.
Wow. I mean, with all the past games, I mean, to me, Mugenics seems like it's got some part of Pokemon as well in it, and also a slight hit of Tamagotchi as well. But I mean, what is the game? I mean, is it like you walk around in a world and you collect these cats and you breed them into what you want? I mean, what's the objective of the game?
Yeah, the game is it's hard to define because it's one of those Animal Crossing type designs where it's not exactly like the closest thing that I can tie it to is Animal Crossing. It plays like Animal Crossing.
Okay.
Like it's more of a casual kickback game that you play for a few hours a day. There are events that are tied to days, so as the days progress in real time, things change. And you are doing missions for different people that, for the most part, revolve around a horde of cats that you're constantly breeding and collecting into your house from your backyard. So you've got like stray cats that are constantly appearing in your backyard, depending on if you leave food out and whatever else. And you're trying to breed the perfect cat to enter in these different contests, which goes into the Pokemon type area where you're trying to beat these kind of almost gym leader type situations where you've got, it's kind of Punch Out ish.
Okay.
You've got all these different cats that you have to defeat, and the more you defeat, the more unlock, and you progress through the game and you get more money to upgrade your house and buy a shit ton of items that actually affect your cats and gameplay itself. So it's very Animal Crossing meets Pokemon.
Okay.
Maybe a little Nintendogs in there as well. It's a hard one to explain because it's really odd.
It's only until you play it until you understand it, really.
Yeah, and you learn as you go. Like you're going to be thrown into a world. Basically, it's an experience. Like you're thrown into this weird world of cat hoarding,
right.
And there's all these different people in this town that all want these different things. And the more you play, like Isaac, the more you play, the more the game unlocks and unfolds, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you go. And eventually, you're like doing tons of stuff during the day, and you're having these monstrous freak cats that you've been breeding over the span of, you've got this like gene pool for forever, and then you start genetically altering cats and making your own cats, and it just gets out of control. That's why it's taken so long. There's so much content in the game, and a lot of the content is kind of this, experience. Like it's hard. It's not a game like Meat Boy. It's not a game like Isaac. It's more of this very odd, flavorful experience that has a lot of elements of Isaac. It feels Isaac-ish.
Okay.
There's a lot of throwbacks, of course, to Meat Boy and Isaac as well in the game, but it's a sim. Like it's a simulation game, much like Animal Crossing. Like Animal Crossing is a life sim.
Yeah.
And this game is a life sim / genetics simulation, where you're tending to the needs of these cats and then trying to manipulate them into these perfect specimens of beauty, speed, and teeth and claws. And the game just keeps going.
Right. So there's really no end point. Like Meat Boy, when it just says the end, it's just you stop when you stop. Really. It's just you just keep going and see what.
There are ends. There are multiple endings.
Okay.
There's a bunch of main characters in the game that you interact with that are all very different.
Okay.
They all want very different things, and
Right.
as you satisfy their needs, their stories progress, and they have a conclusion. Each of them has an ending and a conclusion. But even after all their needs are met, and there is a final ending to the game, you can still play forever and ever. It is endless, and like a lot of the probabilities, as far as like the properties of the cats and the items and everything else,
Yeah.
goes into like real lottery odds as far as stuff that you'll see. And there's a lot of social aspects too, like being able to show your friends your house and the kind of freak cats that you can kind of make. Like it's kind of endless, and that's kind of what we're doing. Like I went through last night. I was going through just the store. So there's a character called Baby Jack, and he sells all the items that are in the game,
Right.
furniture, and there are currently 1,500 pieces of furniture in the game, and within those 1,500 pieces of furniture, there is also that much dialogue that he says about each piece of furniture, and there's actually like story elements within the things that he says that kind of paint this picture of who he is and his significance, and it's fun for me to like creatively. It's
Yeah. Create this world.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's this weird, bizarre living world that will unfold as you play,
Right.
and it's definitely hard to put like, oh, it's a platformer. Like it's not that easy.
Yeah.
It's a weird experience, and it might not be for everybody. I mean, I don't know if like diehard Meat Boy fans are going to be that into it, but it's definitely something that I want to see made.
Yeah.
And it's it's pretty cool.
Fair enough. I mean, is there going to be a kind of? I mean, I remember when I first got Pokemon Red, and I collected Pokemon, and I connected my link cable to do a battle with my Pokemon with someone else, with a friend. I mean, is that kind of what's going to happen with Mugenics as well? Is that there's going to be a social side to compete
we have
with?
we
Yeah.
haven't really gotten to that point yet.
Right.
We do want development to have an ending.
Right. Sure.
We're at a point right now where we're wrapping a lot of stuff up. It took a very long time to get all um, these mechanics in working order, and now we're getting them all to work together. And we're kind of closing little like doors, like, okay, well, this is done, this is done, this is done, and now we can see how they all kind of work together. And right now, we would like to do something that has to do with online something,
Right.
but we're not going to worry about that yet until we have the game fully functional and essentially fleshed out completely. Then we'll look back and see, what can we do with this. But at a very minimal level, it's almost a guarantee that there will be easy ways for you to show your cats and house and that sort of stuff to like brag to your friends on via Facebook or Twitter or whatever else with pictures of the cats that you know altered.
Right. Okay. Oh, that sounds good. I mean, is it so? It's going to be for Steam then, to start with.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any other platforms at all?
The secondary goal is iPad.
Oh, right. Okay. Interesting.
It's definitely, I think, I think it could easily be like the Animal Crossing of iPad.
Wow.
But one can only dream. I don't know.
True.
It's so weird to talk about it because like in my head, like this is the Animal Crossing that I would kill to play. And I love Animal Crossing, and I just don't know how. Well, people are really tolerable with Isaac, and this gets fucking weird. So we'll see. Like it's funny to be working on this game because a lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, you're just doing a cash grab with cats, right?" Because people love cats on the internet, and it's like if we were doing a cash grab with cats, we would definitely not be doing it the way we're doing it. Like we're doing this like black and white game that like is constantly referencing cats dying and shitting everywhere. Like they could have stillborn kittens. Like it's all more realistically and quite gritty.
Right.
Like but also fluffy in a way that Isaac is. Like it looks cute still. So you can get
Yeah.
away with a lot when you make things look cute.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
Because in the end, realistically, like if you've got a stillborn kitten, it can still be cute, and then you can have it taxidermied.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right.
There you go.
Yeah. Definitely. So that's still going to be aimed for this year, first half of this year, or just whenever it's done again.
And that's definitely whenever it's done for sure. But this year.
Great. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. So we're going to go back to Meat Boy the game. So that was going to be before Mugenics, but obviously Mugenics kind of mutated into something else. So I've kind of read in reviews that Meat Boy the game is kind of a twist on Indie Game, the movie, but it's
in a way, yeah. The kind of story I originally was writing it was kind of like the tale of us.
Right. Okay. So it's not a port at all. It's a completely new take, but involving a Meat Boy character.
It's a sequel without being a sequel.
Okay. Fair enough. So how will it be controlled on a touch device? I mean,
I can't say.
Okay.
The way we're doing it,
right.
I have not really seen done the way we're doing it, so it's one of those things that I know if I talk too much about it, that it'll take somebody a week to make.
Right.
I'd like to be the first one to really kind of do it, but yeah, it definitely have an interesting design to it that will be fun, and it might not just be on touch devices; it might be on Steam as well.
Okay, right. Because the only blog post I've seen from your site was just one that said Green Hills. It instantly says Sonic to me. So, I'm sold straight away. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'm sold straight away. It's one of those, like you have no idea. Working on a simulation, so working on Mugenics has been interesting on many different levels. It's been a huge challenge because it's such a departure from anything else I've done. And that's what we set out to do. We were like, well, this is going to be a big challenge. We're up for the challenge. Let's do it. And, looking back, I kind of wish we would have just done Meat Boy because this has been so much of a challenge. And I'm desperately waiting for this to be done so we can go back to something that I'm very familiar and confident with, because I look at that FLA, I go through the art and the animations that I've already done, which I've done a lot of work on it already. And I'm like, holy shit, I just wish I could work on Meat Boy at this point. That's kind of how it works with all games when you've been working on something for a year.
Yeah, sure. So, you're constantly going back and forth between Isaac Rebirth and Mugenics, but Tom is working on the code of Mugenics mainly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. There's also another thing, just slightly off topic. Have you, by any chance, played what phone do you have? Is it an Android phone or an iOS?
I don't have a phone.
Oh, you don't have a phone? Okay.
I have a phone. I avoid cell phones because I want to be able to detach from the internet when I'm not home.
Right.
I also don't like people being able to get a hold of me. I'm bothered by people a lot, so I like to just be able to be completely unattainable. But for the most part, if I'm ever on a phone, it's my wife's phone, and she just has whatever the latest iPhone is.
All right. Okay. But it was in the news like late last year that a couple of developers did a remaster of Sonic 1 and Sonic 2. That they restored like an old zone that was scrapped during its development, and I do think that with especially with Sonic, it's the touchscreen pad. It's improved from what other games had on the iPhone, but they brought out. Do you remember the original Tomb Raider in '96 with the the grid? That.
Yeah. The really good one that nobody remembers how good it is because they made so many shitty sequels.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that game. That game was good.
Yeah, it's crazy because it's just a pure example of how the touch controls do not work on a touchscreen device. They brought out Tomb Raider to it on an iOS device on an iPhone in December, and you have about 60 controls on the screen. Having it's awful. And when you go into the inventory, and there's no visual control to select an item. You have to randomly guess where you have to go, and it's a nightmare. I love the game, but I just kind of gave up after about an hour. It was a nightmare.
It's not. iPhone games don't work unless you develop them for the system.
Yeah.
Ports just don't work.
Yeah.
It's just doesn't happen unless it was a cursor-based game. It's just no point.
Yeah, I mean they have brought up the made for iPhone controllers. I mean they kind of introduced them with iOS 7 last year, and I mean some games where like the GTA series works with them, and it's not bad. I mean, would you consider like a Super Meat Boy port that would only work with this like kind of made for iPhone controller or not?
I don't think it'd be worth it. I don't think that many people actually own those controllers.
Sure.
Realistically, and then it's like, well, we still have because you still have to do the shitty controlled version. You can't just put a game out that can only be controlled by that.
Sure.
Thing. So then the majority of people will play it with the shitty controls, and then it'd just be exactly what you described.
Yeah.
A frustrating, fans of the game who get screwed over by the fact that we made this shitty version of it, and that's like even with Isaac, if it turns out that the game just does not play well at all, we won't release it. Like I don't want to put my name on something that just ends up fucking over fans because they assume it's going to be good and they trust me. Same situation. I never want to do a port of a game for a system that just falls flat.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially a game like Meat Boy that is 100% about the controls. Like in Isaac, the controls, there's a little ham-fisted to begin with. Like it's a dual stick shooter, so it's a little complicated already. But with Meat Boy, it's precision, and you need a really good control setup in order for that to work.
Yeah. So I imagine with Mugenics, I imagine like in the beginning of that development, you kind of aim for it to be for an iPad device.
Yeah, because it's just everything it's one click drag situations.
Sure.
Like it's all point and click and drag.
Okay, so it's kind of made for it, really. So yeah, great. All right, nice one. So with Meat Boy, the game that's a next year game, really?
Yeah, we're gonna start on after Mugenics, or get back to it after Mugenics. There's two projects, actually three. Yeah. One actually, hopefully, if we get Mugenics done, there's a secret game that we've been working on the side that we hope to release by the end of the year, as well, and then we will jump back on with Meat Boy in another game.
Oh.
That may or may not have to do with Meat Boy right after that, or maybe during Meat Boy. Meat Boy, the game will be an easy development cycle, so we can probably actually do two games in that amount of time. So we might jump on two.
Right. I am hoping it's kind of a Super Smash Bros. Take on Isaac versus Meat Boy, or that'd be amazing.
I don't know about that. Like, it's one of those things where I only tackle those things if I feel like I can do the genre justice.
Yeah.
I personally do not see myself being able to design something that's as good or better than Super Smash Brothers. So I'm never going to end up doing that. I don't think. That's
fine. Okay, so you're going to go from some other questions now. Now, with, say, the Xbox One and PS4, I'm surprised myself that backwards compatibility, with it being completely gone, it hasn't raised as much of an issue as I thought, because you've bought, like a player would have bought so many arcade games on demand, and they simply don't work on the new consoles. I mean, does that bother you in a way that people who have bought Meat Boy on the Xbox 360, they can't play it on the Xbox One now?
Yeah, that sucks for sure.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where I'm glad that we, of course, did it on PC, because it sucks to think that a game can just cease to exist at some point in time in a digital world, and if it's not, if it was never on cartridge or anything or a CD, that it just ceases to exist completely.
Yeah.
It dies and it is gone.
Sure.
It sucks. But there's nothing we can really do about it. I hope that one day, maybe closer to the 10th anniversary of Meat Boy, that we could do a remastering kind of remake of the game, expanded a bit, and release it on whatever the current platforms are of the time.
Yeah, sure.
Because Meat Boy will always be near and dear to me as my best work, and I feel like I'm experienced enough that I could jump back in and make it a bit better.
Okay.
But I don't want to do that right now.
Sure. Okay. So I did see in another interview that Meat Boy was meant to be on the Wii, but certain size limitations kind of stopped that from happening. I mean, was that the only thing that kind of stopped it in its tracks with the compression?
Yeah, it did. It just stopped it dead. Like it was the requirement of file size was so it would have to like have no music. It would just be this really piddly version of it. What didn't help? It's like so yeah. If we really wanted to and we had to release the game on Wii, we could have like broke it up into these shitty little pieces and then had people download each piece. But that meant a shitload more work for us and no money because you can't make money off of a Wii game.
Sure.
And, at that point in time, the development cycle was not at all worth the headache.
Yeah.
So, like, it was almost impossible to do, and there's no way we were going to try to do the almost impossible for nothing.
Yeah, sure. I mean, have they relaxed with their restrictions on the Wii U now? I mean, is it?
I don't know.
Ah, okay.
It's one of those things where, like, I don't see the Wii U as something worth developing for right now financially.
Right.
So I don't even know.
Oh, okay. I mean, it's been fair to say in the past few weeks, Nintendo have been in the news, shall we say, quite a bit. I mean, they announced their results. Then they were saying about thinking of launching a new system in next year that relied on health, which was, as only Nintendo could. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but see how that goes. But I mean,
I don't know. I don't understand what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, do you kind of? I mean, obviously, all the stars that you have and the games that you base on is from like popular Nintendo games that was so much fun and harkened back to a time when it was just simple but addictive but challenging as well, but rewarding. And now there's games like seeing Mario Galaxy, for example, or 3D World. If you fail a level so many times, you just have this suit and you just can finish the level straight away with avoiding everything.
Yeah.
I mean.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
I feel like sometimes I worry. So the most controversial, going back to the movie, most controversial thing that Phil Fish said after the movie was Japanese games suck. He said that publicly and got shit for it. It's one of the reasons why he's so hated right now.
Right.
And there was more to that conversation in the interview. It was at GDC, and we talked about it for a little while. John Blow talked about it, and it really got me thinking, like, what made Japanese games so good in the late 80s, early 90s that is missing now, and why is it this way? Yeah. And there's a part of me that worries that Japanese games were so good back then because of limitations, because of the language barrier and because of limitations with the technology. They actually had to be more creative about how they showed the player how to play.
Yeah.
They had to be more creative and more loose about their stories. All these limitations created this perfect environment that made it so they were kind of like forced to be extra creative with their work, and they were forced to be extra innovative because they had so many barriers in the way that were limiting them on what they needed to do. And they didn't, since video games weren't that mainstream then, they didn't have to worry about appealing to everyone. They could just make something that appealed to them. So realistically, in a way, the early Nintendo, Super Nintendo type games were very similar to indie games now, where they didn't care as much about making sure that the games were going to sell super, super well. They could take a bigger risk, and they also didn't put. They had more like, okay, people who play video games are going to play any video game that we make, so let's just make something that we like and put it out there and it'll work. Yeah. And video games were hard, and they were just overall more challenging, and they didn't really care about that because it has a lot to do with coming off of like the history of video games and coming out from the arcade and how arcade games were designed to take your money. Yeah. But then when home console happened, it's like, okay, well, we can't just let them continue forever because then there's no payoff to somebody who can get to the end, because then you could just continue forever. And they were trying to balance that, and they ended up doing the live system and then an ending because pay $50 for a game and you don't want to be able to finish the game in the first day.
Yeah, sure.
And my worry is it's that they were always like this. And it was just because of the limitations of the time that made them good. Like, that's my major worry. I hope that's not true. I hope I'm very, very, very wrong on that. But the more I think about it, the more I do worry about it and think that maybe they always had this mindset. Maybe they always had this mentality of like, let's just make money, or let's just make this so everybody can play it. But I also have a feeling that right after GameCube. So GameCube was the last, I think, great console that Nintendo made that they lost. So GameCube kind of failed and got beat out by all the other consoles, and they were so freaked out about what they were going to do, so they decided to be really innovative and do something really crazy, and then they did the Wii. And the Wii appealed to this really broad audience. So, old people, young people, male, female. It was this blanket kind of everybody had a Wii U, and they got so focused on making money, and everybody did, because the economy sucked all through 2001, 2010. The drop off, midway through, caused everybody in the mainstream, everybody making money, to be extra careful about what they made, and everybody's kind of on this safe mentality. Like, let's only make sequels because we know that people will buy them. Let's not take too big a risk. Let's not frustrate people, so we can make sure that the people who are playing these games, when they review them, get to the end, because then they might give us a bad review, or whatever else. Like, they're making Mario for your grandma. That's what they're doing, because they're making all their future games for this really broad audience. They're not making them for the Nintendo fans anymore. They're not making them for the specific people like me that grew up with them. They're not making games for me anymore, for the most part.
Yeah.
And that sucks. But honestly, I feel like barely anybody's making games for me anymore. Yeah. I don't play as many games as I used to, and I don't feel the same way about games as I used to when I was younger.
Yeah.
That's why I started making games, so I could play more games that I liked.
Yeah.
At least see more games being played that I liked.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem that as games have come into the mainstream more, especially in the last 5 years, and especially with like the games like, say, Call of Duty or FIFA over here in England as well. I mean, that's massive over here. It just seems as it's gone more into mainstream, the less safe it is for developers, really, and Nintendo as well. They don't know really who to aim for now. Whereas 15 years ago, if Nintendo brought out, any kind of game, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, everyone would love it. It'd be great. But it just seems like now everyone is accepted as a gamer.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. It's if you just go down in history and look at any art form, any like new recent art form, like you look at like radio, like when radio started and how that went. You look at movies, you look at comics. They're all the perfect examples of how when a new art form starts, usually the really early stuff, everybody's experimenting because they're trying to find the boundaries. Everybody's like pushing all these different boundaries, and there's all these really crazy different directions everybody's coming from, and as time passes and the new art form starts making money and becomes more mainstream, especially after like a 20-year gap, because that the kids that grew up with that are now like 30 years old, and now they're in control and they're starting to make what they want to see and whatever else. Things they get more accepted. Like movies in the 80s is kind of like how video games were in the 90s. There was this huge boom of movies, and like you could make so much money off of VHS tapes, and straight to the rental store type movies, and it was this giant boom, and everybody's just throwing money at all these different studios to make movies. It didn't really matter. So you have in the 80s you have such a huge variety of interesting, weird, bad, good, just movies, a mass amount of movies because it was booming then, and then. And then you go into the 90s, and it kind of like gets smaller, right? There was less movies in the 90s. They were more specific, and then you go into the movies in the theaters now, and it's just like lowest common denominator. No one's really taking any big risks.
Yeah.
And as that happens, there's always this bubbling of independence that comes up behind it that is trying to do these different avant-garde type things. and there's a market for them too, and that's usually the way it goes. And it's just like movies are pretty fucking shitty right now. Like there's barely, and they still make a lot of money, but like, who the fuck cares about the next crappy Adam Sandler movie that comes out that grosses millions and millions of dollars? People are still going and seeing it, even though they don't really like it.
Yeah, that's right.
Like it's just what people do, and that's kind of what's happening with video games now. People are going to buy the next whatever sequel that's FIFA. The next FIFA that comes out. Everybody's going to buy it. It's going to make shitloads of money, and they're going to play it, but they're really not going to feel fulfilled. It's just they're going through the motions of the day, and they're doing what they feel they need to do, and that's just where video games are. And there's always something to balance it out, though. The shittier mainstream games get, the more good independent games you'll see. That's just how it'll be. That's how it's going to be with movies or any art form you find. Like, same thing with comics. Like, going with superhero comics, and then once superhero comics got into, like, the late 70s, early 80s, suddenly, Arkham and all these different, avant-garde, weird comic book artists that grew up with comics and art are doing their own stuff, and it's running parallel, and it's just the way it goes.
Yeah.
That's games are gonna get shitty until it just implodes.
Yeah, I mean, for example, like when the App Store was launched, like in 2008, and especially the past week with Flappy Bird, I mean, I just couldn't get away from that game. It was on Facebook, Twitter. Now the developers taking it down, and it was kind of a simple game, but it just showed how something so simple but difficult was popular.
Yeah.
And I still think there is still like a desire and a need for it, which your games definitely do, which they aim for. But then you have like other games, like say Dungeon Keeper, which just you build a little dungeon and you wait for a week for this dungeon to build. And it's such a shame because the original game from that I think it was '98 it was released. I mean, it was so good, and it's such a shame how it relies on like in-app purchasing now with the App Store. So yeah, just a shame really. But then there's rumours of Nintendo just thinking of ways to be like bought out. I mean, people are saying to Apple to buy Nintendo. I mean, I think hell will freeze over before that happens, really. But
yeah, it's still been people have been saying that stuff for years. And reality is, I think Nintendo can float for a long time, but yeah, eventually, in the long run, I don't see consoles surviving. Period.
Yeah,
everybody's going to have like the two most profitable platforms right now are Steam and iOS.
Yeah,
but by far, like leaps and bounds beyond consoles. Even though people in people's minds are like, but how can that be true? Like everybody owns consoles, and that's where video games are played. It's like no, because people are lazy, and the things that they are on the most is what they're going to put the most money into. Everybody has a computer, and everybody has a fucking phone, and those are the things that people are going to play games on when they're available for them.
Yeah,
and that's just the reality of it. And eventually, that's just what's going to be.
Yeah.
There's a chance that I feel like maybe one console will survive. There'll be one console, but first person who, like, I just don't understand why Microsoft just doesn't ship a fucking controller with every Windows platform that they sell. They put like a Steam type platform on there, so you can just download all that stuff on and just play whatever you want on your television or whatever else. First person to do that kind of wins the race.
Right. Yeah.
But for the most part, the phones won the race.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there are rumours abound that this next Apple TV is going to have a dedicated app for the iOS devices, so it's just going to stream more so what AirPlay's doing now. It's going to like use the power of the Apple TV, and it's going to have it's going to be crazy if an improvement like that happens. But I mean, it's like you said. I do think that it's not going to be long now until there's not going to be a console that remains. It's going to be in our smartphones or tablets, and we're just going to hook it up to a set-top box instead. We're going to have it all on the go. So I mean,
it goes the same way of everything digital. Like,
yeah.
Again, like I said in the beginning, we're I think people our age-ish are in this digital world, and for the most part, don't pay for TV and don't watch TV. They watch computers, and they download what they want. And they watch Netflix, and Netflix has been incredibly progressive, and that's why they've succeeded. So the next console to be incredibly progressive, like realistically, Xbox One or the PlayStation should have been almost 100% digital. The
Yeah.
only reason they're not is it's kind of like a gas situation here, where there's a bunch of companies, video game, the places that print the video games, that if people just stopped printing CDs, they would go out of business. So they're kind of like keeping them afloat and buying them out. And you've got GameStops and everything else that if they just stop making new games that are physical, they'd go under. So they're invested in it as well. And there's just no reason for why this generation of consoles couldn't have been 100% digital, and they should have been. It would have progressed much, much further and faster, but they were obligated by all these other companies to stay non-digital. But that's where we're going.
Yeah.
Like,
It's inevitable.
I rarely go to the store to buy stuff anymore. Like, I go to Amazon.com and I order it, and it's here the next day, like 2 days.
Yeah.
And that's because that's easier. And we are lazy people, and we want things easy, and whatever is the easiest to do will succeed the most.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, with like Steam OS is coming along, and I don't know if you've tried like the game controller. Have you tried the game controller?
I've tried to get, but Tommy has.
Right. I mean, that seems to be it's different. As a first, I mean, it just seems to cater for many games, like strategy games as well, platforming. I haven't tried one yet. I'd like to, but yeah, it just seems that seems to be the future. Really, it's on Linux, but it seems like there's going to be a time where you're just going to plug a Steam box in, and you're just going to play away. And I think that's really a major competitor with versus the Xbox One and the PS4. Really.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting. It's the reality is you need like a flagship type product, and the reason why Steam succeeded is because of Half-Life 2, because it required you to do it.
Yeah.
So, I can't predict the future, but if I was Valve, I would be launching the next Half-Life with the system, and then it would be huge.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Or the next Minecraft or whatever, whatever they want to end up doing.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I'll try and wrap it all for you, Ed. Don't worry. Now, with the basement collection that you brought out about a year ago, I mean, I have to ask. I mean, a lot of the games. I mean, so much fun. I mean, Ether especially. Is there any chance that there's going to be a return to Ether at all in some way?
I'd love to. I mean, I've had sketches of a sequel or an expanded versions design, because really Ether was supposed to be like the first part of a series.
Right.
And I've really enjoyed working with Tyler in the past, and I've actually worked with him on the Basement Collection. He was the programmer for the actual collection. And yeah, I mean, I don't see. It's one of those things that I want to do before I die. So it's on the list. Like, I'd like to do another Ether, and I have the basic outline for how I want to do it, and I think it's really cool, and I'd love to do it. It's just all about finding the time to do so.
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I was first playing it, I mean, I was just randomly just swing onto clouds. I didn't mind. I didn't care what I was doing, where I was going. I just like happy just to float around in space and even I was trying to do a game of like how much speed I could build up before I could crash to a planet. It was great, and it reminded me of I'm not sure if you remember the Genesis game Rise Star.
I know. Wait, were you like an armadillo?
No.
Star.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't completely remember. I just know the name, I think, of the character.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of that in a way. It just seems it had that kind of charm, but more so the freedom that you could go anywhere in this tiny little universe. So yeah, it'd be great to see if you come back to it. That'd be great.
Yeah, I will eventually.
In final year, I mean, a lot of people seem to have the impression that you need a degree to get into into the games industry in some way, no matter what kind of part you want to get to. And obviously, you and Tommy are kind of proof that you don't really need to. You just need to really like learn the skills you need, and then you just get out there. Do you have like kind of any advice for like the students who like when they finish?
Yeah, well, it all depends on what. Like, this is a common question for sure.
Yeah.
And it's definitely different depending on the person that you are. If you went, so like if you're right now going for a game design degree or whatever,
yeah,
and you haven't made a game yet, you're not going to be making any games.
Right.
That's just the fact. Like, in order to succeed in this kind of environment, or even enjoy it enough to continue it for the amount of time that you'll need to in order to see any profit off of anything you're doing, because you're going to have to put in like 10 years, you're going to have already needed to, like, you would have already been driven by it. It would have been haunting you at night, and you would have been making crude video games or video game-like things for quite a long time.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that says that that's the way to go, because not everybody is meant to do this. Like, it can be very defeating at times. Like, you have to be very driven, and you have to be very confident, and you have to be very happy in what you're doing, because it's a long process. And that's one thing that people miss from the movie, is the fact that I had been doing this for 10 years prior to the movie.
Yeah.
And I had not been making any money doing it. Like, I didn't make any money for the first 6 years making video games.
Wow.
I did it because it was fun. It was my hobby. It's what made me happy, and that's what I like to do. And if that's how you are, then you're going to be great with indie games. If not, then you should probably focus on getting a job at a company that has more of like a boundaries for you to work in. There's no harm in that. Like, a lot of people think that indie games and mainstream games are somehow rivals, and that's not at all true. Like, we exist together, and we have no ill will towards each other.
Yeah.
I have a lot of different friends and family that work in the industry, and I feel like it's all one deal. Like, it's all one deal, and there's no animosity either way. So, yeah, I don't know a lot about working in companies because I never did, but I would assume that if you're not already making games, definitely push towards working in a company. And all I could say is logically make sure that you do something that makes you stand out from everybody else, to make sure that you're significant in the company.
Yeah. Great. Right. Okay. I think that's it, Ed. Thank you very much. Thanks for this interview.